The humiliation hung thick in the air. "Don't you ever talk back to me," Nathan Carter hissed, his voice low and dangerous. The operations manager of Harper Tech Solutions towered over the woman standing before him, his pale blue eyes sharp with authority. "You are nothing here. Nothing. Clean this room now or don't bother coming back tomorrow." Camille Harper, disguised as Janet the cleaner, stood still, gripping her mop, her knuckles white. "Sir, the floors are spotless. I've cleaned them over and over again," she replied evenly, keeping her voice steady. Nathan didn't care. Without another word, he picked up a full cup of water from the desk and poured it straight onto her. Cold liquid drenched Camille's hair, ran down her face, and soaked through the stiff uniform she had been wearing for a week now. Her shoes squelched on the freshly mopped floor as water pooled around her feet. The shock of the act made her gasp. But it wasn't the temperature of the water that stole her breath. It was the sheer cruelty of it. Nathan smirked. "Now you have something real to clean up." He turned on his heel and walked away, never suspecting that the woman he had just humiliated was actually his future boss, the soon-to-be CEO of Harper Tech Solutions. The shiny floors of the Harper Tech executive suite reflected the harsh glow of fluorescent lights. The expensive office furniture, the panoramic city views, the glass walls, it all signified power, success, and wealth. And yet Camille Harper was here, gripping a mop instead of sitting in the CEO's chair. Her name tag read Janet, not Camille Harper. Her hands, which had once signed multi-million-dollar contracts, were now raw and red from industrial cleaning solutions. The woman who had been on Forbes 30 Under 30 list for her innovations in sustainable technology was now treated as if she were invisible. As she pushed the mop across the floor, the sharp click of leather dress shoes approached from behind. Nathan Carter loomed over her, holding a stack of reports in his manicured hands. He had never looked Camille in the eye during executive meetings. To him, she had always been a cleaning lady, someone beneath him. A slight gust of wind from the hallway made the papers in his hands slip, scattering onto the damp floor. Camille instinctively bent down to retrieve them. Her jaw clenched as she fought every fiber of her being that screamed to reveal her identity, to fire this man on the spot for his arrogance. But she didn't. That wasn't the plan. Just a few weeks ago, Camille had been preparing to take over Harper Tech Solutions, the company her father, Theodore Harper, had built from the ground up. 35 years ago, Theodore had started Harper Tech in his garage with just a dream and $2,000 borrowed from his grandmother. Over time, he had turned it into a multi-billion-dollar fintech empire, one of the most successful Black-owned companies in the country. But success came at a cost. 6 months ago, Theodore suffered a heart attack. The doctors were clear. His 80-hour work weeks had to stop. It was time for him to step down. Camille, his only child, had been groomed for leadership her entire life. With a degree from Harvard Business School, a track record of success, and a reputation as one of the brightest minds in tech, she was the obvious choice. But her father hesitated. One evening, as they sat in their modern home in Westwood Hills, overlooking the city skyline, he finally voiced his concern. "Camille, you know I couldn't be prouder of everything you've accomplished," he began, his voice warm but serious. "Your business sense is extraordinary. Your technical knowledge is impressive. But there's something you don't know." Camille put down her fork. "What is it, Dad?" Theodore sighed, the weight of his legacy pressing down on his shoulders. "You've never been in the trenches," he said. "You've never seen how this company really works, from the ground up. You've never experienced how management treats the people who keep this company running but don't have fancy titles or corner offices." She started to object, but he raised a hand. "When I built this company, I was the janitor, the accountant, the salesman, and the engineer. I knew every part of my business because I had done every job. That perspective is invaluable." His sharp brown eyes, so much like Camille's, locked onto hers. "I've been hearing things, Camille, whispers, that the culture of Harper Tech isn't what I intended, that the values I built this company on, respect, integrity, fairness, have been replaced by something else." Camille listened carefully. "Everyone puts on a show for the boss and his daughter," Theodore continued, "but you can't lead what you don't understand." The challenge hung in the air between them. Camille had never been one to back down from a challenge. "What are you suggesting, Dad?" she asked, leaning forward. And so the plan was born. Camille would go undercover as a night shift cleaner for 2 weeks. No special treatment, no shortcuts, no privilege. She would experience Harper Tech the way thousands of employees did, from the very bottom of the corporate ladder. The transformation was dramatic. Camille's designer wardrobe was replaced with simple, worn clothes. Her silky, straightened hair returned to its natural curls, hidden beneath a plain headscarf. Her immaculate manicure was stripped away. Her signature makeup disappeared. No one would recognize her. Through Prime Clean Services, an outsourced cleaning company, Camille was hired as Janet. The paperwork was handled discreetly. No one in HR knew who she really was. For 2 weeks, Camille would work, listen, and observe. She had no idea that these 2 weeks would change everything. She had no idea that she would uncover a hidden world of abuse, cruelty, and corruption. And she certainly had no idea that Nathan Carter, the very man who had just humiliated her, was secretly working to steal her father's company out from under him. But Nathan had no idea either, because he hadn't humiliated just any cleaner. He had humiliated the very woman who would soon hold his entire career in her hands. Camille Harper stood in front of the Harper Tech Tower, her identity hidden beneath the gray uniform of a cleaner. The once flawless nails that had tapped away at boardroom presentations were now bare. Her signature diamond studs had been replaced with plain metal hoops, her designer glasses swapped for simple frames. The transformation was complete. Janet the cleaner had officially arrived. With the help of Prime Clean Services, her placement at Harper Tech Solutions had been arranged without raising suspicion. The HR department had no clue who she really was. As far as anyone at Harper Tech knew, she was just another night shift janitor, assigned to the executive floor. She had 2 weeks to discover the truth about the company she was about to inherit. 2 weeks to see if the Harper legacy still stood for respect, integrity, and innovation, or if it had rotted from within. But Camille had no idea just how much those 2 weeks would change her. Her first night as a cleaner began at 10 p.m., long after the executives had left for the day. The orientation was brief and impersonal. "Listen up," barked Leonard, the night shift supervisor, barely glancing at her. He thrust a ring of keys and a checklist into her hands. "Stick to the routine, don't touch anything personal, and if you steal even a paperclip, you're out. No second chances." His tone was cold, his posture dismissive. He didn't bother making eye contact. To him, she was just another nameless worker in the machine of Harper Tech. Camille nodded, gripping the keys tightly. For the first time in her life, she was truly invisible. No more glances of admiration. No more respectful greetings. No more acknowledgement. As Janet the cleaner, she was nothing more than a shadow in the halls of power. She moved through offices where million-dollar deals had been made, where high-stakes strategies had been crafted, where her own name had been spoken in admiration and respect. Yet now, no one noticed her. People stepped around her without a word, some even bumping into her cart without apologizing. Executives carried on loud, unfiltered conversations in her presence, discussing private company matters as if she weren't even there. They never suspected the cleaning lady had the power to change their fates. By the end of her first shift, Camille's hands were raw and blistered. Her arms ached from scrubbing, her shoulders burned from pushing the heavy cleaning cart. The reality of physical labor was hitting her harder than she had expected, but something far more painful was sinking in. The pristine Harper Tech her father had built, the company that had promised respect and fairness for all employees, looked very different from the bottom looking up. By the start of her second night, Camille had adjusted to the physical demands of her job. The aching muscles were bearable. The blisters were hardening into calluses. She had learned how to move efficiently, distributing her weight while mopping to minimize the strain. But no amount of physical adaptation could prepare her for the true challenge of this undercover mission. Nathan Carter. At 45 years old, Nathan had climbed the corporate ladder through ruthless efficiency. He demanded results no matter the cost. His perfectly pressed shirts and meticulously styled hair made him look like a leader, but beneath that polished exterior was a tyrant. While executives saw him as a hardworking manager, the cleaning staff knew the truth. Nathan Carter ruled with an iron fist. His inspections were brutal. His expectations were impossible. "This is unacceptable," he barked during Camille's first cleaning inspection. He held up a white glove pointing at a barely visible smudge on a ceiling vent, an area not even on the cleaning list. Harper Tech represents excellence in everything, he sneered. Everything. And yet, you people can't even clean properly. Camille bit her tongue to keep from responding. Nathan wasn't just strict, he was vindictive. He forced the entire cleaning crew to stay an extra 2 hours to redo an area that had already been cleaned. No extra pay, no complaints allowed. And worst of all, he seemed to enjoy making people suffer. Nathan had fixated on Camille from the moment she arrived. Maybe it was because she was new. Maybe it was because she still had a quiet confidence that she couldn't quite hide. Maybe it was simply because he enjoyed bullying those he thought were weak. Whatever the reason, Nathan had made Janet, no matter how well Camille cleaned, Nathan found something wrong. The windows had streaks, visible only under a flashlight. The carpets had microscopic lint, requiring a third vacuuming. The stainless steel wasn't polished enough, even though it shined like a mirror. And then came the bathroom incident. Camille was halfway through cleaning the executive restrooms when Nathan stormed in for a surprise inspection. Instead of waiting for her to finish, he insisted on inspecting every step of the process. He criticized her mopping technique. He insulted her choice of cleaning solution. He even mocked the way she organized her cart. "Are you deliberately this incompetent, or does it just come naturally to you?" he sneered. The words stung. Not because they hurt Camille's pride, but because she had heard those exact words before. From men like him. Men who believed their status gave them the right to humiliate others. She wanted to scream at him, to tear off the uniform, reveal who she truly was, and fire him on the spot. But that wasn't the plan. So she swallowed her pride. And with gritted teeth, she simply said, "Yes, sir, I'll do better." Nathan smirked. That was exactly what he wanted to hear. But what he didn't know, Camille wasn't just enduring this abuse. She was documenting everything. She was watching, she was learning, and she was preparing for the moment she would take everything away from him. The cold water hit her like a slap. Camille Harper stood frozen as the liquid drenched her hair, seeped through her uniform, and pooled at her feet on the freshly mopped floor. Nathan Carter, the ruthless operations manager, stood over her, a smug smirk curling at the edge of his lips. "Now you have something real to clean up," he sneered. The empty cup clattered to the ground, echoing in the silent corridor. Camille couldn't move, not because she was shocked by the coldness of the water, but by the coldness of the man who had just done this. This wasn't just cruelty, this was power unchecked. Nathan didn't just see her as a cleaner, he saw her as nothing, as someone he could humiliate without a second thought, someone who had no power, no voice, no recourse. If only he knew. If only he understood who he had just humiliated. But that moment wasn't now. For now, Camille was still Janet the cleaner. For now, she could only do what any invisible worker would do. She bent down, her soaked uniform clinging to her skin, and began mopping the floor again. Nathan chuckled and walked away, his leather shoes leaving muddy footprints in his wake. She would clean them up. For now. Nathan Carter had been watching her from the beginning. Camille could feel it. The way his eyes followed her, the way he found reasons to criticize her work, the way he took pleasure in making her life miserable. It wasn't just that she was new, it was something else. Maybe it was because she didn't cower the way he expected. Maybe it was because she carried herself differently, even when pretending to be a low-level worker. Maybe he simply enjoyed breaking people. Whatever the reason, he had made her his personal project. It had started small. He would check her work 3 times when he checked others only once. He would make her redo tasks that were already perfect. He would assign her extra cleaning duties while letting others go home. But then it escalated. It was Thursday night, nearing the end of her first week. The executive floor was nearly empty at 11:30 p.m. The offices were dark, their occupants long gone. Camille was mopping the hallway outside the main conference room, her cleaning cart neatly positioned against the wall. She had just finished refilling her mop bucket when she heard it, the sharp click of leather dress shoes on the marble floor. Nathan. She kept her head down, focusing on her work. But he stopped right beside her cart, his presence suffocating. She felt his eyes scanning her work, looking for something to criticize. Then it happened, a deliberate motion. As he walked past, Nathan swung his arm out, just enough to hit the side of her cleaning cart. The cart tipped over, crashing to the ground with a loud thud. Cleaning supplies scattered across the floor. The mop bucket overturned, water spilling everywhere. Camille's stomach twisted as she watched the perfectly organized cart she had spent hours working with reduced to a chaotic mess. Nathan paused for a brief moment, surveying the destruction with a barely suppressed smile. Then, as if nothing had happened, he walked right through the mess, leaving dirty footprints across the floor she had just cleaned. He never looked back, never acknowledged what he had done, never offered to help. To him, it wasn't even worth mentioning. Camille stood frozen, staring at the wreckage before her. And in that moment, something inside her snapped. This wasn't just about disrespect. This wasn't just about invisibility. This was calculated cruelty. The abuse of power with no fear of consequences. As she knelt down, fighting back the burning rage, she realized something. This wasn't just about proving herself worthy of succession anymore. This was about justice for herself, for the workers like her, for the invisible people who kept Harper Tech running. From that moment on, Camille was prepared. She had kept her mouth shut long enough. Now she would watch. Now she would document everything. The time, the dates, the witnesses, the exact words spoken. She would observe which executives enabled Nathan's behavior and which ones looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Piece by piece, she would build a case. Nathan thought he had broken her, but in reality, he had just lit a fire inside her. The next time Nathan came for her, Camille was ready. He approached her in the hallway outside the executive conference room, his expression oozing superiority. "You think you're clever, don't you?" he hissed. Camille didn't answer. Silence was her best weapon. Nathan stepped closer, his voice dropping into a dangerous whisper. "When I talk to you, the proper response is yes, sir, or no, sir. Didn't they teach you basic respect in whatever gutter they pulled you from?" Camille's stomach turned, but she kept her face neutral. "Yes, sir." "Sorry, sir," she forced out, the words bitter on her tongue. She had just begun mopping again when Nathan did the unthinkable. He deliberately stepped onto the freshly cleaned floor, leaving muddy footprints across it. "This floor is still filthy," he shouted, as if speaking to an audience that wasn't there. "Can't you do anything right?" Camille looked down. The floor had been spotless until Nathan dirtied it himself. "I just cleaned it, sir," she said, keeping her voice calm. "It was dry and spotless before—" "Are you contradicting me?" Nathan interrupted, his tone dropping to an eerie quiet. "Do you think you know more about Harper Tech standards than I do?" Before she could answer, Nathan took a full cup of water and poured it directly onto her. The shock of the cold liquid stole her breath. She gasped as it ran down her face, soaking into her uniform. Water dripped from her hair, her hands, her sleeves. Nathan dropped the empty cup on the floor beside her. "Don't even think about leaving until you're dry. And this floor? Spotless." He walked away without looking back. Camille stood frozen, humiliated, but not broken. Because what Nathan didn't know? This was the moment he had sealed his own fate. Camille Harper wrung out the mop, her soaked uniform clinging to her skin, the icy water mixing with the heat of humiliation burning inside her. Nathan Carter had walked away without a second glance. His dirty footprints smeared across the floor she had just cleaned. She could still hear his words. "Now you have something real to clean up." She swallowed hard, forcing down the anger bubbling inside her. This wasn't just about her anymore. This wasn't just about one cruel man abusing his power. This was about an entire system that let it happen. One would think that Nathan Carter was the only problem at Harper Tech. He wasn't. There was also Derek Shaw, the marketing director, a man who looked every bit the charismatic executive at 42. With his perfectly tailored suits, designer glasses, and carefully tousled hair, Derek projected an image of effortless success. But beneath the polished exterior, he had a very different reputation. He was an expert at manipulating power, not through overt cruelty like Nathan, but through 1,000 small humiliations. And Janet the cleaner was his new target. Camille's first encounter with Derek came during her second week undercover. His office was on her cleaning rotation that night, a task that should have taken about 20 minutes. It would end up consuming over 3 hours. At 10 p.m., Camille pushed her cleaning cart into Derek's office. He was still there, staring intently at his computer screen. Unlike many executives who ignored the cleaning staff completely, Derek immediately engaged. "Oh good, you're here." His voice was casual, but his tone carried an edge of expectation. This office is an absolute disaster. We had a creative brainstorming session, and it needs a thorough cleaning. Camille glanced around the room. A few coffee cups on a side table, some neatly stacked papers, a small smudge on the glass conference table. Hardly a disaster. Nevertheless, she nodded and got to work. Derek watched her, not in the way most people absently observe cleaners, but with an unsettling level of scrutiny. As she dusted the bookshelves, he cleared his throat dramatically. That's not how you clean glass properly. Camille paused, biting her tongue. You're leaving streaks everywhere, he continued, rising from his desk. Circular motions, not straight lines. She adjusted her movements, pretending to take his unsolicited advice seriously, but he wasn't done. Every few minutes, he found something new to criticize. The way she wiped down the desk, the method she used to vacuum the carpet, the improper organization of her cleaning supplies. It was clear he wasn't just being particular. He was playing a game where he controlled everything. When she finished, Derek walked around, performing a theatrical inspection, running his finger along surfaces like a strict school principal. This simply won't do, he declared, shaking his head in exaggerated disappointment. The windows still have smudges. The carpet has visible lint. And did you even dust the top of the picture frames? Camille gritted her teeth. There was nothing wrong with the room, but she had no choice. She nodded and started over. The second cleaning was even more meticulous than the first. When she finished, Derek performed another slow inspection, this time focusing on entirely different areas. The baseboards are still dusty. My desk wasn't properly organized. What's that smell? Did you use the wrong cleaning solution? And just like that, she had to start again. By the third round, Camille was exhausted. Her arms ached, her legs burned from hours of standing. She was hours behind schedule on her other assignments. By the time Derek finally declared himself satisfied, it was past midnight. He stretched lazily as if he had just finished a long, exhausting day and said, "See, that wasn't so hard." Then, without so much as a thank you, he walked out. That night, Camille learned something important. Derek wasn't just like this with her. This was his routine. He demanded multiple cleanings of an already spotless office. He left coffee cups precariously balanced on trash bins, ensuring they would spill when emptied. He scattered paper clips on freshly vacuumed carpets, then complained about the poor cleaning job. It was all a game, a power trip. And the worst part? No one stopped him. Camille had had enough. After the water bottle incident with Nathan, she decided to test Harper Tech's reporting system. If the company truly valued respect and dignity, like it claimed, then surely human resources would do something. And who better to approach than Karen Mills? Karen, the HR director, had spent years building a reputation as the company's approachable, understanding advocate. Her face was on employee support posters with the tagline, "Talk to me, your voice matters." Her office door had a rainbow sticker and the words, "Safe Space," written in friendly typography. So the next day, during her lunch break, Camille cautiously approached her office. Karen greeted her with a warm smile. "Come in, have a seat. Can I get you some coffee?" Her friendly demeanor was so convincing that, for a brief moment, Camille felt hopeful. Maybe someone would finally listen. Maybe there was still integrity left in Harper Tech. She told Karen everything. The water incident with Nathan, the relentless harassment from Derek, the humiliations, the manipulation, the abuse. She kept her account factual and professional, just as she would have advised any employee to report misconduct. Karen nodded along, her brows furrowed in concern. When Camille finished, Karen let out a deep sigh and reached across the desk to pat her hand gently. Then she said something that made Camille's blood run cold. "First, I want to thank you for bringing this to my attention. We take all reports very seriously at Harper Tech." Then she smiled, but this time her tone was different, subtly dismissive. "You have to understand, Nathan has high standards. His expectations might be a little tough, but he just wants the best for the company." Camille felt her stomach turn. "As for Derek," Karen continued, "he's a perfectionist. Maybe next time try to anticipate what he wants before he has to ask." Then the final blow. "In corporate environments, having thick skin is an asset." Karen didn't say it outright, but the message was clear. No one was coming to help. The system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as designed. And that meant Camille had to destroy it herself. Camille Harper sat stiffly in the cold, impersonal office of Karen Mills, the HR director at Harper Tech. Across from her, Karen gave a practiced smile, the kind that looked friendly but felt empty. Camille had laid out everything: Nathan Carter's deliberate abuse, Derek Shaw's humiliating power plays, the daily indignities suffered by the cleaning crew. She had kept her tone professional, her words measured, careful to stick to the facts. And for a brief moment, she thought Karen might actually listen. Karen sighed deeply and reached across the desk, patting Camille's hand in a gesture that was somewhere between comforting and condescending. "First, I want to thank you for bringing this to my attention," she began, her voice carrying the rehearsed cadence of corporate speech. "We take all reports of workplace incidents very seriously at Harper Tech." Camille held her breath, waiting. But then, the shift happened. Karen's smile didn't fade, but something changed. A subtle dismissiveness crept into her tone. "I think there may be some confusion about workplace relationships here," Karen continued. "You have to understand Nathan has high standards. His expectations might be a bit tough, but he just wants the best for the company." Camille's stomach twisted. "As for Derek," Karen went on, "he's a perfectionist. Maybe next time try to anticipate what he wants before he has to ask." And then, the final blow. "In corporate environments," Karen said, her voice lowering as if sharing a secret piece of wisdom, "having thick skin is an asset." Camille felt the air leave her lungs. That was it. The decision had already been made before she ever walked in. Nathan would face no consequences. Derek would keep playing his games, and Karen Mills would keep protecting them. Camille forced herself to nod politely, even as her blood boiled beneath the surface. She stood up, thanked Karen for her time, and walked out. The safe space sign on Karen's office door mocked her as she left. By Friday evening of her third week, Camille had almost reached her breaking point, but she had one more lesson to learn, one final test of just how deep the corruption ran. That lesson came in the form of Veronica Langston, the senior vice president of sales. Veronica was a legend at Harper Tech. Her team consistently outperformed competitors. She dominated industry conferences. She secured multi-million-dollar deals with the kind of cutthroat negotiation tactics that made other executives nervous. At 45, she was fierce, brilliant, and ruthless, and she was not used to being contradicted. The confrontation happened at 9 p.m., as Camille was cleaning the main conference room on the 38th floor. She had just started wiping down the long, polished table when a sharp voice cut through the air. "Excuse me, where do you think you're going?" Camille froze, startled by the direct address. She turned to see Veronica Langston standing near the conference table, her sharp gaze locked on her. "I'm sorry for interrupting, ma'am," Camille said politely. "This room is scheduled for cleaning at 9 p.m. I can come back later when you're finished." It was a reasonable response, professional, respectful, but Veronica wasn't interested in reason. Her eyes narrowed. "How dare you disrupt my meeting?" she snapped, stepping closer. Camille's pulse quickened. I'm just following the cleaning schedule," she said carefully. "Following the schedule?" Veronica scoffed. "Do I have to waste my valuable time explaining basic professional courtesy to someone who cleans toilets for a living?" The words landed like a slap, and for the first time, Camille felt something snap inside her. She had endured Nathan's cruelty. She had tolerated Derek's games. She had walked out of HR knowing no one cared. But this, being publicly humiliated for simply doing her job? Something inside her refused to stay silent. With quiet strength, Camille looked Veronica in the eye. "With all due respect, ma'am," she said, her voice steady, "I am following established protocol for this building. If there's a conflict with the cleaning schedule, the proper procedure is to notify facility management in advance. I'm just doing my job, just like you're doing yours." Silence. The entire conference room froze. The junior salespeople who had been pretending not to notice the confrontation stopped typing. They stared, horrified at what had just happened. A cleaner had dared to push back. For a brief second, Veronica herself seemed stunned. Then, her expression darkened. Pure rage contorted her face. Before Camille could react, Veronica's hand swung out in a sharp arc. Crack! The slap echoed through the silent room. The force snapped Camille's head to the side, sending her stumbling back against her cleaning cart. Her cheek burned from the impact. Pain radiated through her face, and yet the shock was worse than the pain. This was not a corporate humiliation. This was not an HR cover-up. This was a physical assault in front of an entire room of people, yet no one moved. The junior salespeople stared at their laptops, their notes, anything but the assault they had just witnessed. No one spoke up. No one intervened. No one offered help. The silence was deafening. Veronica stepped closer, her voice low and dangerous. "Don't you ever talk back to me. You are nothing here. Nothing." Her voice dripped with pure venom. "Clean this room now or don't bother coming back tomorrow." Pain throbbed in Camille's cheek, but that wasn't what froze her in place. For the first time in her career, she fully understood something. Harper Tech wasn't just broken, it had been built this way on purpose. And no one, not Nathan, not Derek, not Veronica, not even HR, had ever expected someone like her to fight back. Her entire body trembled, but she didn't let it show. She knelt down, forcing herself to mop the floor. For now. But in that moment, she made a silent vow. This ends here. She wasn't just gathering evidence anymore. She wasn't just proving she was worthy of leading Harper Tech. She was going to burn the entire system to the ground. Camille Harper had spent 2 weeks in the trenches, enduring humiliation, abuse, and injustice that no employee should ever face. And now she held the power to bring it all crashing down. She wasn't just gathering information anymore. She wasn't just testing company culture. She was building a case, one that would change Harper Tech forever. After weeks of enduring Nathan Carter's cruelty, Derek Shaw's humiliation, and Veronica Langston's violence, Camille knew she wasn't just dealing with bad management. She was dealing with a criminal conspiracy. Using a small, hidden camera tucked inside her cleaning cart, she recorded conversations. Her phone, discreetly placed in her pocket, captured images of confidential documents left carelessly on desks. What she found shocked her to the core. Nathan, Derek, and Veronica weren't just abusing their power. They were stealing. They had been diverting company funds, money meant for lower-wage employees, into their own personal accounts. They had leaked confidential trade secrets to competitors, aiming to undermine Camille's father, Richard Harper, and force him out before succession could take place. And worst of all, they had covered their tracks by blaming hardworking employees, getting them fired for fabricated reasons. The evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable. Camille wasn't just dealing with corporate bullies anymore. She was about to expose a full-scale corporate scandal. After weeks of working undercover, Camille had enough proof to dismantle Harper Tech's leadership team overnight. But the question was, how? If she simply handed over the evidence to her father, it would be handled quietly. Nathan, Derek, and Veronica would be fired, maybe even sued, but the deeper issues within Harper Tech's culture would remain untouched. If she went public, the backlash could damage the company's reputation, costing thousands of innocent employees their jobs. She needed a strategy, one that would expose the corruption while preserving the company's future. That night, after her final shift, Camille did something she hadn't done in weeks. She changed back into herself. Gone was Janet the cleaner. In her place stood Camille Harper, heir to the Harper Tech empire. She hailed a ride and headed toward her father's Hillcrest estate, a modernist mansion overlooking the city skyline. Hours ago, she had been scrubbing floors inside the Harper Tech tower. Now she was returning as an executive, with the power to bring justice. Richard Harper was waiting in his home office. His expression was unreadable, but there was an intensity in his eyes that Camille had never seen before. "You look exhausted," he said, studying her carefully. "I am," Camille admitted, settling into the chair across from him. "But not just physically. I'm exhausted by what I've discovered." For the next 3 hours, Camille presented everything. She pulled up emails, financial records, and performance reviews. She played recordings of conversations where Nathan, Derek, and Veronica mocked lower-wage employees, spoke about their financial scheme, and discussed their plans to push Richard Harper out. She ended with the most damning piece of evidence: the video of Veronica Langston slapping her across the face as an entire conference room watched in silence. Her father said nothing at first, but his silence was dangerous. His jaw clenched, his hands balled into tight fists. When he spoke, his voice was low and controlled, but vibrating with barely contained fury. "They've betrayed everything this company stands for," Richard said. "Everything I built, everything I believed in." Camille nodded. She knew that this wasn't just about her. This was about the violation of everything Richard Harper had worked for. The question was, how would they fight back? A private takedown would be too easy. Firing Nathan, Derek, and Veronica wasn't enough. If they handled this quietly, the cycle would repeat in a few years with new abusers, new enablers, and new victims. No, this had to be a public reckoning. They had to expose the rot from the inside out. Richard agreed immediately. Over the weekend, they assembled a plan, a perfectly executed corporate coup. Step 1, the board meeting. A mandatory meeting was called on Monday morning with every Harper Tech executive, board member, and senior manager in attendance. Nathan Carter, Derek Shaw, and Veronica Langston walked in with their usual arrogance, completely unaware of what was coming. Step 2, the reveal. Richard Harper started the meeting with a calm, measured tone, stating that recent concerns about workplace culture and financial irregularities had led to an internal investigation. Then he handed the floor over to Camille. For the first time, Nathan, Derek, and Veronica looked at her with real concern. Then she pressed play on the first video recording. The room fell into stunned silence as Nathan's cruel insults filled the speakers. Derek's manipulative games followed. Then, the real bombshell, Veronica's slap played on full display for the entire boardroom. There was no escaping it. The executives shifted uncomfortably. Some stared at their hands. Others exchanged glances as if questioning everything they thought they knew. Nathan went pale. Derek swallowed hard. "But Veronica," she snapped. "This is ridiculous," she shouted. "You're taking the word of a janitor over mine?" That's when Camille delivered the final blow. "I'm not a janitor," she said, standing tall. "I'm Camille Harper." Silence. Absolute deafening silence. And then, chaos. By the end of the meeting, Nathan, Derek, and Veronica were escorted out of the building by security. Their employment was terminated immediately, with criminal charges pending for their financial crimes. Harper Tech's public statement acknowledged failures in leadership, but also pledged a full-scale cultural overhaul. And Camille? She took her place as CEO, not just because she was next in line, but because she had earned it. She had walked the halls as the invisible worker. She had endured what her employees endured, and now she would make sure no one at Harper Tech was ever treated as invisible again. The moment of truth had arrived. For 2 weeks, Camille Harper had lived as Janet the cleaner, enduring humiliation, abuse, and injustice that no employee should ever face. But now she was about to flip the script. She wasn't just gathering evidence anymore. She was about to expose a scandal that would shake Harper Tech to its core. Late into the night, Camille and her father, Richard Harper, had finalized their strategy. The plan was flawless. Richard would call an emergency board meeting for Monday morning, ensuring that every executive, department head, and board member was present. Nathan Carter, Derek Shaw, Veronica Langston, Marcus Winters, and Karen Mitchell, the 5 executives at the center of the corruption, would have no idea what was about to hit them. The board would be briefed on the general nature of the concerns, but not on Camille's undercover role. Their genuine reaction would be captured in real time as the truth unraveled. Most importantly, Camille would maintain her cover as Janet the cleaner until the very last moment. It meant enduring one final night of humiliation. But after everything she had been through, it would be worth it. By Sunday night, every detail was locked in. The board was alerted. The evidence was compiled. Security was quietly briefed in case anyone tried to cause a scene. The only thing left was the final confrontation. Monday morning, the Harper Tech Tower gleamed under the bright sunlight, its glass and steel reflecting the city skyline. By 8:30 a.m., Camille walked through the lobby one last time in her Janet the cleaner disguise. She deliberately assigned herself to the executive boardroom, ensuring she would be the one preparing it for the 10 a.m. emergency meeting. At 9 a.m., as she wiped down the sleek, polished walnut table, the doors swung open. Nathan Carter strode in, his expression sour at the sight of her. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his briefcase in one hand, coffee in the other. Camille kept her tone neutral. "I'm assigned to clean the boardroom, sir. I'll be finished well before the meeting." Nathan's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the spotless room. "Make sure it's actually clean this time," he sneered. The CEO and the board will be here. If I find a single speck of dust, you're fired. I'll check your work before the meeting." Camille lowered her head in fake submission, but inside she was smiling. Let him think he had power. For just a few more minutes. By 9:45 a.m., executives and board members began gathering outside the boardroom, whispering among themselves. An unexpected emergency meeting always meant one thing: something big was happening. Richard Harper entered last, his expression unreadable, acknowledging greetings with brief nods but offering no explanation. As he walked past Camille, their eyes met for half a second, a silent exchange that spoke volumes. At 9:55 a.m., Nathan returned to inspect the boardroom. He made a theatrical show of running his finger along the spotless windowsill, then dramatically exhaled. "You missed spots on the windows," he announced loudly. "The table hasn't been polished properly. This is exactly the kind of sloppy work I've come to expect from people like you." Camille bit back her response and nodded obediently, pretending to re-clean areas that were already perfect. By 10:00 a.m., the room was full. Richard Harper stood up, calling the meeting to order. "I've called this emergency session," he began, his deep voice cutting through the murmur of conversations, "to address serious concerns about the corporate culture at Harper Tech." Silence. Executives exchanged uneasy glances. Karen Mitchell from HR straightened her posture, pretending to take serious notes on a problem she had helped create. Derek Shaw, ever the creative genius, kept his fake calm exterior, but his fingers drummed nervously on the table. Marcus Winters adjusted his tie repeatedly. Veronica Langston's expression remained unreadable, but Camille noticed the tightening of her jaw. That's when Nathan spoke up. "Sir, with all due respect," he said, forcing a chuckle, "this is a conversation that should happen behind closed doors. We don't need the cleaning lady in here." He pointed at Camille, his tone dripping with disdain. "Get out." That was it. The moment had arrived. All eyes turned to Camille, expecting her to scurry out like the invisible worker they thought she was. Instead, she straightened her back. She carefully set her mop against the wall. Then in a calm, measured voice, one that commanded attention, she spoke. "Actually, I'd like to stay," she said smoothly. Her voice had changed. Gone was Janet the cleaner. This was Camille Harper, executive heir to Harper Tech. Nathan froze. Derek and Marcus leaned forward, confused. Karen's face paled. But Veronica, her eyes darkened. Camille reached up and pulled off the plain glasses, replacing them with her signature designer frames. She unwrapped the headscarf, letting her natural curls fall freely. Then, with deliberate movements, she unzipped the gray uniform, revealing a tailored blazer and blouse underneath. Gasps rippled through the room. Silence. Complete, stunned silence. Then, chaos erupted. "What is this?" Nathan demanded, rising to his feet, his face red. "This," Camille said, folding her arms, "is your reckoning." She turned to Richard Harper, who now stood beside her, arms crossed. "Go ahead, Dad. Let's show them the truth." Richard nodded and pressed a button on his laptop. The first recording played. Nathan's racist insults boomed through the speakers. Derek's manipulative games followed. Then, the final bombshell. The video of Veronica Langston slapping Camille, playing on full display for the entire boardroom. The executives sat in stunned silence. Nathan's face drained of color. Derek stammered something incomprehensible. And Veronica, her hands clenched into fists. "This is fabricated," she snapped. Camille smiled. "Security?" she called out. The doors swung open and corporate security entered the boardroom. Nathan, Derek, and Veronica were escorted out immediately. Their access badges were revoked, their devices confiscated, and their employment terminated on the spot. By the end of the day, criminal charges were filed. And Camille Harper, she walked out of that boardroom as the new CEO of Harper Tech. The moment was electric. Around the executive boardroom table, expressions shifted from confusion to pure shock as recognition dawned. The very executives who had worked with Camille Harper for years, who had attended meetings with her, reported to her, discussed corporate strategy with her, had failed to recognize her beneath the disguise of Janet the cleaner. And why? Because they had never truly seen the cleaning staff. To them, janitors were invisible, unworthy of notice. Camille let the silence hang for a moment, relishing their stunned disbelief. Then she spoke with quiet authority. I am Camille Harper, the new CEO of Harper Tech, as my father's successor. The room fell deathly silent. Nathan Carter, Derek Shaw, Veronica Langston, Marcus Winters, and Karen Mitchell sat frozen in their seats, their mouths slightly open. They had spent weeks humiliating her, mocking her, dismissing her as nothing more than the help. And now they were staring at the woman who held their entire careers in her hands. The tables had turned. Without breaking eye contact with them, Camille retrieved a small remote from her pocket and clicked it. A presentation appeared on the massive screen behind her, filled with timestamps, video footage, and undeniable proof of their abuse, corruption, and mistreatment of staff. The first video played, Nathan Carter, in crystal clear security footage, pouring an entire cup of water onto Janet. The timestamp and location were visible in the corner, making it impossible to deny. Nathan's face drained of color as he watched himself on screen, his habitual arrogance crumbling. That's taken out of context, he stammered, grasping for any excuse. You were insubordinate, and pouring water on an employee is assault, Camille cut him off coldly. There is no context that makes that acceptable. The next slide advanced. Derek Shaw in multiple video clips forcing Janet to clean his office 3 times over while making increasingly trivial complaints, clearly enjoying the power trip. Derek Shaw, Camille said, turning to him directly, has routinely abused his authority, wasting employee time, creating unnecessary work, and engaging in deliberate psychological intimidation. Derek's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. But Camille wasn't finished. She advanced again, moving systematically through every piece of evidence she had gathered. As the damning proof piled up, some board members began furiously taking notes. Others shook their heads in disgust. One elderly board member removed his glasses, polished them as if the action might somehow change what he was seeing, then sighed in disbelief. When Camille reached Veronica Langston's segment, the sales executive instinctively tried to control the narrative. This is a gross mischaracterization, Veronica snapped, gripping the edge of the table. That video has clearly been manipulated to make it look like... Camille clicked forward. A second camera angle appeared, capturing Veronica's slap in full clarity, along with the shocked faces of the employees who had witnessed it. Would you like me to play the audio as well, Miss Langston? Camille asked, raising an eyebrow. Your exact words were, don't you ever talk back to me. You are nothing here. Nothing. Veronica fell silent, her carefully constructed professional mask shattered. She was finished. By the time Camille concluded her presentation, the entire atmosphere of the boardroom had changed. The arrogance and entitlement that had filled the room just minutes earlier had crumbled into a mix of shock, fear, and desperate calculation. Each of the exposed executives was doing the math in their heads, searching for any possible escape route. But there was none. They were cornered. Nathan Carter saw the writing on the wall first. His shoulders slumped as he whispered, I thought you were just an ordinary cleaner. Then pathetically, please, don't fire me. As if on cue, the boardroom doors swung open. 2 security officers stepped inside, standing silently. Mr. Carter, one of them said, we've been instructed to escort you out immediately after this meeting. Nathan turned to Richard Harper, eyes filled with rage and disbelief. You can't be serious, he snarled. After everything I've done for this company? Richard stood up slowly, his face completely unreadable. After everything you've done to this company, he corrected. This isn't just about one bad decision, Nathan. It's about a pattern of abuse, exploitation, and entitlement. This company was built on integrity, and you have no place in it. Nathan turned as if searching for an ally, but no one met his gaze. Derek, Veronica, and Marcus were next. Security confiscated their company access cards, locked their devices, and led them out of the building. Karen Mitchell was fired on the spot, her so-called safe space HR department exposed as a fraud. The rest of the executives sat in stunned silence, watching as the old order collapsed before their eyes. And Camille? She stood tall, in complete control. The meeting continued with discussions of how to rebuild Harper Tech. Board members approached Camille one by one, offering congratulations, apologies, and commitments to change. As the room finally emptied, only Camille and her father remained. Richard turned to his daughter, his pride evident. "You've done something extraordinary here," he said quietly. "You didn't just expose corruption. You lived through it. You saw firsthand what needs to change." Camille exhaled deeply, her emotions catching up to her. This changed me," she admitted, "more than any business school ever could." Richard nodded. "The board wants to accelerate the transition," he said. "They're convinced you're ready." Camille looked out over the city skyline, feeling the weight of leadership settle over her shoulders. She thought about the janitors, the assistants, the interns, the invisible workers who kept this company running. "I am ready," she said finally, "but not because I'm your daughter, and not because I have the right degrees. I'm ready because I've seen this company from the ground up, and I know exactly what needs to change." She picked up the gray cleaner's uniform she had worn for 2 weeks, folding it carefully, not dismissively. "This," she murmured, "taught me more about leadership than Harvard ever could." She would never forget that lesson, and neither would Harper Tech. Camille Harper's journey teaches us one of the most profound lessons about leadership, power, and the importance of integrity in any organization. It is a reminder that true leadership is not about titles, wealth, or social status. It is about understanding the people you lead, standing up for what is right, and ensuring that the values an organization claims to uphold are genuinely reflected in its culture. One of the biggest takeaways from Camille's story is the power of perspective. Before going undercover, she had always viewed Harper Tech from the executive level, analyzing numbers, strategies, and reports. But spreadsheets don't reveal mistreatment, and corporate mission statements don't reflect reality unless they are actively upheld. By stepping into the shoes of an entry-level employee, she gained insight that no board meeting could ever provide. She learned that respect and dignity are not just buzzwords for a company's branding, they are the foundation of a healthy workplace. Without them, even the most successful companies are rotting from within. Another crucial lesson is that abuse of power thrives in environments where people are afraid to speak up. Throughout her time as Janet the cleaner, Camille saw firsthand how easily people in authority could mistreat others when they believed there would be no consequences. Nathan Carter, Derek Shaw, and Veronica Langston didn't just abuse their positions. They felt entitled to do so because they assumed no one would ever challenge them. Their downfall was not just about their individual actions. It was about a toxic culture that allowed their behavior to go unchecked. This teaches us that silence enables abuse, and that organizations must create environments where workers at all levels feel safe to report mistreatment without fear of retaliation. Perhaps the most inspiring lesson is the power of justice and accountability. Camille didn't just expose corruption, she held people accountable. She didn't seek revenge, she sought real change. She used strategy, patience, and undeniable evidence to dismantle a system that had oppressed the very workers who kept the company running. This teaches us that justice isn't about impulsive retaliation. It's about ensuring that people answer for their actions in a way that leads to meaningful change. Finally, Camille's transformation reminds us that great leaders never lose touch with the people who make success possible. The best executives, CEOs, and managers are those who understand and respect every level of their organization, from the janitor to the boardroom. Her undercover journey not only changed the company, but changed her as a leader. She emerged not just as an executive, but as someone who truly understood the workforce she was about to lead. At its core, Camille's story is a call to action. Treat people with respect, stand against injustice, and remember that power is not about control, it is about responsibility. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and leave a comment below about your thoughts on Camille's journey. Have you ever witnessed workplace injustice? How do you think leaders should handle abuse of power? Your engagement helps us spread powerful messages like this. So hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with more eye-opening stories. Together, we can shine a light on workplace injustice and demand respect for everyone, no matter their position. Let's make a difference. Like, share, comment, and subscribe now.